Welcome to the My House Podcast, a show about the past, present, and future goings-on at the My House Youth Drop-In Center in Wasilla, Alaska, with your host, Michelle Overstreet.
Hi, welcome to episode 16 of the My House Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Overstreet, and today I'm joined by Wasilla Police Department Officer Ryan Hellman, who is, we're big fans of Wasilla Police
Hopefully
Department.
the police department, not just me.
Yeah, the whole group. It's a great group of people, been super supportive of us from the very beginning, and I'm excited about having you today to visit with us. Isaac, do you have any housekeeping for us?
Yeah, we're just kind of getting right back into the swing of things. So there was our first video episode that was on International Overdose Awareness Day and National Recovery Month, that event that was down at the park, which I am really hoping that by the time this is releasing, that is finally uploaded. It took a while to get it all up onto the internet, but it should be out now. So if you haven't watched it, that's one where I'd recommend actually going to the YouTube channel and watching it. Other than that, Diag Nonsense just released an episode with Josh Freifogel that we also recorded like 3 weeks ago. So this was kind of like our backlog of stuff that we had edited beforehand is all coming out now. That was a really fun episode too, so check that out. And then, start of October, My Voice and Redemption coming back. So on the podcast side of things, we have a bunch of stuff going on. Yeah.
On deck, yeah.
And I guess the next big event for us would be Rotary Uncorked, which is October 8th, I believe.
Yes, Saturday, October 8th. It's a sock hop at the Menard Center. 6 p.m. We have tables available. We have sponsorships available. If you have something that you'd like to donate that you want to promote, there's usually about 400 people there. It's kind of a who's who event, super fun. Food, tapas sponsored by different restaurants across the valley. The Grape Tap, some of the best restaurants with paired beer and wine. It's very fun. Very fun.
Sounds so good.
It's going to be fun.
Oh. All right, that's all I got.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you for being with us today.
No, it's good to be here again.
We leased this building in 2013. It was an old electrical warehouse that had been vacant for about a year and a half. And one of the it was cool, but one of the cool things that happened, we opened the cafe September 1st of that year, and by October 1st, we had already been robbed. And so
it was so cool.
It was so cool. But what was cool, there were two things about it. One is that there were camps around Wasilla that were homeless camps, and one of them was quite large. 30 to 40 people lived in it up below Home Depot, between Home Depot and down where Batteries Plus used to be.
Yeah.
They stole the iPad from the cafe, and it was synced to my phone. And so I got up the next morning, and lo and behold, my phone alerted me that I had 1,280 photos in the cloud. And I was like, I wasn't up all night taking photos, so somebody's taking photos that are in my cloud. And when I started to click through the photos, it was girls that we were familiar with here that were 14, 15, 16 years old, intense, doing drugs and having sex with 30, 40, 50-year-old men. And I marched up to the mayor's office, then Bert Cottle, and said, Bert, this is why we can't have camps. They recruited girls by saying, you should come camping with us. You'll be camping. You camp for the weekend. So Michael Carson tells a story about driving up there just to go see what it was all about, because we knew that these guys were there. And here comes a pickup truck, and a little girl jumps out with her little stuffy clipped to her backpack, little high school girl, and starts marching up the trail. And Michael's like, whoa, where are you going? And she says, I'm going to camp with my friends. And Michael says, hey, are you the parent? Because let me just tell you what's happening here. And so parents were actually dropping their kids off to go camping at this homeless camp. So when the photos came in, Bert swiped through about 3 photos, put the phone down and slid it across to me, and picked up his phone and said, get me the chief of police, with a couple of key expletives in there. And the city worked to clear the right-of-ways, spent a year clearing the right-of-ways and imposing some legislation that keeps camps from happening. But that particular camp, I think there were 12 sex offenders in there that were not registered, 13 outstanding warrants, and then just a bunch of people that were mostly men who were victimizing young people in our age group. So in the scope of that, we had such good support from Wasilla Police Department and worked together to collect license plate numbers of people that were circling the building. We got facial, Jay took some pictures, so we had pictures of the guys that were really victimizing young girls from our population. And your team is just outstanding at tracking down bad guys.
That would have been a little bit before my time, but I know since I've been at the department for sure, I've heard quite a few stories about how many homeless camps, especially the teenagers, used to be around the city. And my assumption is that the fact that they're almost non-existent essentially anymore. We've got a few pockets of adults, but I haven't been to any teen homeless camps in a few years. That's got to be at least somewhat due to what you guys are doing. So that's a good kudos to you guys.
Yeah, it's exciting to me to see the difference in the last 10 years of what, the kids that are not hanging around. The former manager of cars, Stan George, came down one day and he said, "I just came down to see what you're doing. There's no kids sleeping in my coffee shop anymore." And I was like, okay, we'll call that a victory. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, little things like that I think as a community, they change people's safety, feeling of safety and security. But even more than that, the youth that used to be there are here. They're working. They're doing good things.
Homelessness across the country is obviously a big issue. Every city has its problems. And there's a myriad of people out there you could talk to on the ways to fix it, right? Like everybody's got an idea. The nice thing about what I think you guys are doing is the age group that you work with. You're catching people at a time in their life when they're very impressionable and they're just learning this stuff. So they're not really entrenched in that lifestyle yet. And a lot of them are coming from places where they didn't have a lot of support or love or were abused already. And so you guys are able to get your arms around them a little bit and show them that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay. You don't have to live like that. You can have a nice life. You can have good things. That you can be a good person, and you can have support for it. And one of the reasons why I've been so attached to you guys since I've been at the department is because of that, because I can actually see the difference that you guys are making, which is not to say that these other, nonprofits aren't doing or trying to do good work. It's just harder when you're dealing with adults because they're already set in their ways, right, usually, and it's hard to fix somebody once they've been entrenched in a lifestyle. But you guys are able to do that prior to them getting into it.
Well, and there are very few models that really have the mission that we do of the continuum and the outcome on the other end of being productive, and there aren't very many that have that as a focus. So I really feel like part of what we're doing is adult homeless prevention in spades.
Sure.
And I think in addition to that, I sit on a panel for an organization in Seattle called Catalyst Kitchens, and we did a panel discussion with a group from Richmond, Virginia that wanted to set up a drop-in center like this. And they were asking questions, and one of the things that they had done was look at the amount of money spent on kids 25 and younger on emergency room visits, homeless kids, emergency room visits, DJJ, and police or first responders. And they were calculating the amount of money that they should ask for based on that amount for 2 years. And their conclusion was, we can do so much with the amount of money that's being spent in those 3 areas. And I think that's one of the things I feel the most proud of, is that we're keeping kids from getting into trouble. We're keeping them from going to, if they go to the emergency room, we have a navigator that takes them, and then we find out what they actually need. Is it behavioral health? Is it addiction? Is it a depression problem that makes them feel physical symptoms or suicidal? And deal with it. Yeah. And it doesn't turn into a revolving door or a repeat police issue when it's a behavioral health issue or an addiction issue. And I think that's where we really work well together.
Yep.
And
well, there's a shared. So your guys' organization and us as a police organization, we are very similar in the fact that when we are meeting people, a lot of times we're meeting them at their worst.
That's so true.
And so, as a police officer, most people become police officers because they don't like injustice. They don't like seeing people being victimized or taken advantage of. They don't like crime, obviously. And you guys are kind of the same way. You don't like seeing people being victimized, and you don't like seeing people take advantage of. And so I think that's why it's been such a easy partnership and easy relationship with you guys is because we share a lot of the same values. And one of the nice things that you guys do that we also do as police officers, hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a key component of this recovery process for people.
Totally.
Is an accountability. And a lot of people never had that. It was just, do whatever you want because I don't care. And that was their role model.
Right.
Like you can do whatever you want and there's no consequence, there's no accountability. And the fact that you guys are able to do that and see some positive outcomes from that is awesome. It just shows that it's okay to hold people accountable, right? That's a good thing.
You know what I teach my staff, Ryan, and I believe that this is true. I think kids don't just come here, but they come back because they do know that we care. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they test. And they test us by doing stuff and asking us to hold them accountable because it's easier to say, oh, just do whatever you want. It's hard to hold people accountable.
Well, little babies do that. Toddlers, you tell them, don't touch that. And you'll see them. They'll go over there and they're looking at you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to touch that.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. So you set those boundaries, you make them clear. And very similar with what we do. You set those boundaries.
Yeah.
Hey, look, you're really not in charge right now. Okay. But we want to help you. Like we're here for you.
Yeah, we're willing to do the hard stuff because it's harder to do that work than it is to be passive.
Yeah,
and I think in a lot of organizations they feel like if they hold people accountable that they're going to be unpopular or the people won't come back. I think with a lot of youth, that's how they know you care. That you're willing to do the hard stuff. You're willing to go the distance. Our peer support teams get in the ditch with them. Our navigators, go pick them up when they've crashed and burned and call for help. Or last week we had a young man who was arrested and went to jail, and we had staff that went over and visited him in jail and tried to help him make a plan for his next steps. What are you going to do next?
Yeah.
And so, in those cases, I really think that doing the hard stuff makes such a difference.
It's worth it because a lot of people aren't willing to. And that's not necessarily a knock on those people. It's just,
no.
It's hard to have difficult conversations with people, right? Like it's hard to tell somebody, hey, look, what you're doing is not okay. Those are tough conversations because there's going to be some kind of backlash and people normally want to stay away from conflict. Mm-hmm. Having you guys as a resource has been phenomenal because you were talking a little bit about DJJ earlier. With the correction system the way that it is right now, especially since COVID started, like DJJ isn't taking anybody for almost anything unless it's very serious or there's some kind of warrant issue. And so it's been hard for us because like runaways, especially, like it's a status offense. It's not a crime. I'm not going to chase somebody down because
like
they're runaway.
Criminal.
Right, because I'm going to get them and then I'm going to take them back to this house that they don't want to be at and they're just going to turn around and run away again.
That's right.
So knowing that I can send those folks to you guys and knowing you guys have the resources, the ability and the time to do follow-up and to give them some resources, like good resources like job skill training, education, which are all extremely important for people who don't have a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can start to get some hope put into their lives. There was a guy, I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago now, lives just up the road with some roommates. He's a client of yours. He had called in, his friends had called in saying he was suicidal. And so I went over, talked to him, found him in the road. He's walking in the road, and we had a really good conversation. And I don't remember what happened in our conversation, but I got the feeling that he had been here before. And so I was like, hey, do you know Justin? Do you know
Justin.
Mike? And they're like, yeah, I know both of them. And I was like, would you feel more comfortable talking with those guys? And sure enough. And then I gave him my phone number, and a couple of days later while I'm driving around on patrol, he called me and was like, hey, I'm not feeling safe. I need some help. And I said, I hear you. Can I send an ambulance to you? That way you don't have to like get put in cuffs and put in the back of a cop car. I want this to be as less stressful for you. So I was like, yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
So he reached out.
Yeah.
And this is for sure because of the work you guys are doing here, right? He knows that the people here care, whether he's taking advantage of that all fully.
Right.
Right. He knows if he needs help, he can turn to you guys. So it's good. It's good to have that resource, especially for us, because it's hard seeing juveniles out there on the street doing the things that they're doing, and there's not much we can do because most of them are foster kids or they're in the OCS system, wards of the state, and it becomes a difficulty for us because the state's just like, hey, they got to go back to this place they don't want to be. And so
we hear some really, really terrible stories about different places that kids land. And, I really believe that part of the value of what happens here is that sense of community. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who feels this way. There are other people who have figured out ways to survive foster care, for example, this is not to say that all foster care experiences are negative, but some are. And some good foster families have challenges, just as a part of the journey with difficult stages and situations with kids. But I think that they find reassurance here and a sense of community, and they get involved in art projects and things that take their mind away from that so that they aren't on a gerbil wheel just thinking about that and getting all wrapped up in that. Or the
store, the coffee shop. They've got all these things here that they can do that are kind of outside the norm for kids their age. So
Right. I truly believe that the job training programs are life-saving here. The partnerships we have in the community, Black Birch Books, the Alaska Midnight Scents, the places where we are able to place youth, and it gives them a sense of being needed, of belonging in the community, of I have value. It's that difference in seeing a kid as a liability or an asset. And when you shift that on them, some of them don't know what to do. They don't know how to behave like an asset. They're so accustomed to being a liability that they behave on that side of the spectrum until...
Well, they expect treatment from other people based upon that, right? Like,
yes.
I'm expecting... And so when they don't get that, like, wait a minute, something's off here.
It takes them a while to trust. And so those are the ones that test the most because they're just not sure that we're for real. Yeah. And those experiences, a lot of times I'll use Taylor at Black Birch Books for an example. She just has a way of, she's an ex-military policewoman, so there's no BSing her. Yeah. It is
command presence.
Yes.
Get some expectations clearly defined.
Yes. And this is what you do, this is what you don't do. Yep. And so I really love the experience that some of the kids have when they go there. And just really get the sides of the road clearly identified. But she loves on them. And she makes them feel like they're part of the community. And people come in to talk about books and buy books, and they're included in the conversation. And all those little things. One of my favorite stories about the cafe is a kid that came to us out of Goose Creek. He went in as a 17-year-old and came out at 23. Didn't know anything. Never finished high school. Just had a real... his teenage experience was mostly jail.
Sure.
And so he was with us for about a year and a half and just killed it. He ended up working in the back at Red Robin as a line cook, and he's married with 3 kids right now and is just killing it. Yeah. But he said one time to a group that had bought Christmas gifts for him, he said, when you come here and you buy a cup of coffee from me, it makes me feel like I want to be a better person. I see the car that you drive, and when you tell me about what you do for a living, it helps me believe that I could have a better life. And one of the mortgage brokers that was in that group came back to my office, and I wasn't out there to hear that, and he said, I can't believe you made me cry. And I said, I wasn't even out there. How could I be blamed? And he told me about that conversation, and that really resonated with me. I think that young man articulated something that we often miss.
Well, I think as human beings... and this is just me talking, I think there's a fundamental want that people have to feel obviously accepted and loved, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think people crave accountability. Maybe not everybody craves it in the same way, but I know for me personally, like being a police officer, when I have leadership, not necessarily at the police department right now, but people I've worked for in the past, I can tell when they don't care because they don't hold me accountable.
Right.
And so for me, that's a big deal. If I don't have somebody like pulling my chain and be like, hey man, that's a little too much. Like you need to calm down. Okay. This they're watching.
Yeah.
They care about what happens to me and obviously my family, because they know I'm, married and stuff. And so that's a big deal. And I think that speaks to people on a level that it's hard to put into words sometimes, mm-hmm. right?
I totally agree.
The love, the accountability. Mm-hmm. And then I think something else is, so 2013, you guys are almost at 10 years.
We are.
It's awesome. You guys have been around long enough now that you've got a ton of success stories. So when you've got new people coming in, now you've got people that can be, look, this is somebody that I can show, they can talk to you, they can tell you their experience with us. They can show you how they went from A to B, and it's able to speak louder than just any kind of lip service that anybody's going to get. They can see the change that has happened, and maybe that's something that they can shoot for as a goal.
Yeah. And
so it's really nice. And my assumption would be that over the next few years, as you guys, start to look for new buildings and expand and get bigger, that you'll probably start seeing success on a more exponential level, just because you're going to start having, hopefully it's a cascading effect, and you'll just have a bunch of people starting to get better. That'd be nice.
Yeah. There are a couple things happening that are sort of along that line. We're partnering with Priceless in Anchorage to open a coffee shop in Spenard. That's a drop-in center with wraparound services for.
It's a rough area too.
Oh
Spenard.
man, right? That's going to be a test, right?
Yep, for sure.
But it's for people that have been trafficked, and so we'll have the opportunity to test it in a more urban environment. And then we're also working on some housing and case management in Homer. And so we can see that people are recognizing that, what we're doing is working, and looking for ways to scale that to their community, and to the groups that they serve. But no matter where they are, the police presence is going to be important. The fact that you come in here and visit with our clients, and I think almost every time you've been here, I've either seen or heard about a client who says, "Oh, I don't like police officers." They have this whole thing.
Yep.
And then by the end of the week, they're your biggest fan.
Yep.
They become friends. And I think that's part of that accountability thing you were talking about. They really do want that. And they want to be connected to people that could keep them safe. And you're someone who could keep them safe. But some of the places that they come from, they've been trained that, the police are going to come and get us.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody about
it. Or they've seen it firsthand, right? They grew up in a home where their parents were either on their substance abuse or physical abuse, domestic violence, stuff like that. And so they're conditioned to think that the police are the boogeyman, and when they show up, somebody's going away.
Right.
This is the same type of thing that I had to fight kind of out in the villages when I was a VPSO, was when that plane shows up, somebody's going to jail. So people immediately kind of shut their doors, shut their windows, and they don't want to talk to nobody.
Right.
So a really nice thing, and a little bit selfishly for me coming over here, is kind of help keep me level, because it's very easy as a police officer to get jaded, right?
Right.
We're dealing with sometimes the worst people in our communities at the worst moments in their lives. And so we're constantly just, man, people are terrible. And it's really easy to get in that mindset. But coming over here and seeing what you guys are able to do, it's a morale boost for me. And I'm sure I could speak for other officers that have been over here to see, what these guys are actually trying. Like, they're actually making a difference. There's something going on over there. And so to come over here and have these relationships and build those friendships has been really awesome. And I know we got to do that coffee with a cop on the 25th, which was great. I had a good time.
First, I couldn't believe how many people came for that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it was a community event where there was so much joy and acceptance and exuberance. I wasn't here, and people were texting me. I was at a meeting in Anchorage that was for the Governor's Advisory Board on Homelessness, which I chair, so I couldn't skip, right? And so it was so interesting that the energy around that seemed so positive, and I feel so proud of that. I really do. I think in a lot of communities, the organizations operate in silos and there's no overlap. And we're so blessed in this community to have this cohesiveness where, you come in the door and we're all like, "Hey, Ryan." Yeah. And, the kids that have had negative experiences are like, "Wait, what? These people are our friends?"
Yeah.
And it just turns that on its head. But the next time they see you, they don't have to run.
Correct.
And
that's a good thing for us. In the military, when we were deployed, that we had one of our commanding generals over there they explained it when you're dealing with people, because there was quite a shift from the invasion, right, to the elections, and then moving on to more like a we're here to help type mission. And that's a hard transition for a warrior to make, right? And so it's kind of same mindset with police officers, but he akined it to something called the love bank. So you want to put as much in that bank as possible, because every once in a while you're going to have to make a withdrawal.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't want the negative, right? You don't want the negative to come along with that. You want, when I have that next interaction with somebody who's been in trouble, I want them to be like, "All right, yeah, you got me. I know you're cool. I know I don't got to worry about anything because you're here."
Yeah.
And so, kind of selfishly, we'll keep ourselves safe as officers, right? But at the same time, if that helps us have a good contact with that person, and then later on they could come back and say, "Hey, if we're dealing with a group of them and that person's there, like, no, this guy's cool.
Right.
Like, help him out." That's the kind of stuff that is a payoff down the road. And plus, we're getting to ultimately do what we all wanted to do as police officers, and that's protect people and help people and get them the resources that they need to be better.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so important. And I also love the fact that they see you as an ally, even if they've been on the wrong side of a situation. Being able to kind of step across that and say, no, I know this person. And part of what they're saying, from my perspective as a director here, part of what they're saying is they believe that you're going to be fair with them. And that's really all they want. They want to be treated fairly. They'll be accountable if you hold them accountable.
I think that's what everybody wants, right? They just want to be treated fairly.
Yeah. And so they when you step into that circle, they know you enough to know it's okay. This is okay. He's not going to do anything that victimizes us. Yeah. And I love that.
It's important as officers too. It's very easy for us to do our jobs and constantly pointing out what other people are doing wrong, right? And it's easy to forget that every single human being is one bad decision away from a bad day, right? Including me.
Right.
I've had bad days out there on the road, and I've gotten talked to, and I've had to answer for it. So I'm no different. I just try to mitigate those as much as possible. And I think one of the keys is just you make a mistake, you get the accountability, and you say, you know what, that's not going to happen again. I messed up. That's okay. It's okay to mess up. And I think that's a important message for people to hear is just because you made a mistake, even if it's a big one, like that does not have to be it. Like everybody has value, and it's going to be hard to see that value if you don't value yourself, right? Like, so you constantly putting yourself down. And I know it was something I struggled with a long time as a kid was my self-esteem. And so that was something that has a long time to build up. And, but I see a lot of that stuff with the people that are here and talk to, and can see how, one decision leads you down one path, or, it leads you down a good path. And, so it's nice to have you guys here for guiding people and, hey, let's make a better decision.
Right. Well, and you're part of that, as we kind of bring kids in, you'll see them here working in the cafe, working in the boutique, working with case management in the back. Then the next time you see them might be driving through Burger King, right? They're having they're in the community. Yeah. And so, or
they're working here helping other people, which is also fantastic.
Isn't that amazing?
Like, hey, I remember you a couple years ago.
I remember we had a staff member who every time the police would come in, she would say, "Oh, you arrested me." And I would say, "Don't say that. When you're a staff member, you don't have to keep going back to that and reliving that. It's okay to leave that in the ditch." And
you wonder if that's a big realization for them, though, that they're seeing an officer and it's not for them. Right. Like that may be a big self-esteem boost. I'm like, hey, I'm not in trouble.
I'm not the guy. Yeah. I also really enjoy the idea that we've got kids who have come in who have wanted to be a police. When they were little, they wanted to be a police officer when they grew up. And I think that it's so important for them to have people that they can relate to. And I remember one of my favorite clients. I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but every once in a while. But I had a favorite that wanted to be a fireman, and he had a drug charge that prevented him. It was a barrier crime for being a fireman. And I really think it sabotaged a lot of his goals because he never found anything that he was where he could be you, right? Yeah. He wanted to be one of the good guys. And I think we have to keep putting that out in front of them and helping them move forward that one step at a time and seeing themselves as one of the good guys. Yeah. Because if they grow up in those families with violence and drug dealing and, one of the kids I mentioned earlier said, I grew up and my mom had boyfriends all the time that were drug dealers and beating her. And I never had anyone in my life that I thought was a good role model, really. And if they experience that, having people that are able to come in and say, here's an example of.
Well, it's nice. And we were talking about the similarities earlier between a lot of the people that work here and police officers. I think in both of these organizations, you have people that have this overwhelming sense to want to protect and fight for others. And I know as a police officer, there have been times where I've been out with people. There's a girl, she's actually a client here. She's great. Been out with her on some struggling calls. And I've also, when I met her, actually, it was over here at Wonderland Park. But I remember talking to her. And as I'm talking to her, I try to look at people and watch them, watch her body language. And I noticed she had a lot of cuts all over her arms and stuff. And I remember she's talking, and I'm just trying to hey, how's your life? Tell me what's going on, not the normal banter stuff. And she kind of gave me a little bit of background on stuff she'd been struggling with. And I don't know, as she was talking, I just, I'm a dad too. So I'm thinking, man, what if this was my daughter? Right. And I remember getting emotional and I said, can I give you a hug? Like, I think the hug was more for me, to be honest with you, to make myself feel better, because it was so sad listening to her talk. And then I walk in here the other day and she's sitting down and she's got the big smile on her face. She's talking with people. And I'm like, man, this is great.
Yeah, she's doing schoolwork, working on stuff.
It's so nice to see that. And these people, they just want, and a lot of people they just want attention. Yeah, they do, but not in a negative. Like, these people need good attention, right? Not just there they go again doing the same old stuff. They're crying out for something, and the fact that you guys are able to provide that stuff here is, it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Thank you. You're part of that. When you come in and recognize them from an experience like that, they feel significant.
Yeah,
and there's power in significance. Nobody wants to be nothing. There's nobody in a kindergarten class when the teacher says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Nobody raises their hand and says, "I want to be homeless," and nobody raises their hand and says nothing, because they're little enough that they have a dream. And when we have kids that come in that they say nothing, we know that's been beat out of them.
Yeah,
they've been beat down to the point where they don't believe that they're worthy, and that's where you really have to, the people with lived experience, the people with the social services background, the people that are in law enforcement, we wrap around them, the medical profession, the behavioral health, the addiction, we wrap around them and just continually bring people into their sphere of influence that validate, encourage, and help them to believe that they could be whatever they wanted to be.
That's why I like the way you guys run the program, where you got these navigators who went through that stuff.
Right.
Because now you have, it's just like with anything, with the military or with police officers or, service jobs, firefighters, stuff like that, where you've gone through tough things together. And not necessarily these people did this stuff together, but it's a shared experience. Like, oh, hey, I had the same thing happen to me when I was a kid. My mom was also an addict or whatever. And so now there's an understanding. I know I can talk to this person, I can trust this person because they actually understand.
Yeah.
And I have to tell people, and this is actually something when I went through my negotiator training that I learned, it's okay for, a lot of us want to make people feel better when they're telling us an experience, to just say, I understand. It's okay to say, I don't understand. And I try to make sure I emphasize that to people. If I don't, like, if I haven't been through that, I can't, how dare I say I understand? I don't understand. It's absolutely outside of my scope of understanding, because I never experienced it. And experiencing stuff like that, to me, trying to think about putting myself in that is heartbreaking. And but I can tell a difference when I say, because people usually amped up. You don't understand. You don't get it. I say, you're right. I don't.
Yeah.
And just right down. They come right down, and it's like, all right, good.
Yeah.
I got you. Now let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, we've acknowledged that we're on two different planes.
It's okay to do that. I think people are afraid to do that because they don't, they want that acceptance, right? Oh yeah, I do understand. Okay, yeah, we're the same. You're not.
Yeah.
It's okay to be different. That's what makes us special and have value.
And I think something the peer support training really helps is it helps them, even if they do have the same experience, that they can navigate them out of the ditch.
Right.
And I think it's easy to get in the ditch with somebody, but you don't want to stay there with them. Or you're right. Carl Soderstrom.
Misery loves company, right?
Yes. Carl Soderstrom from True North Recovery always says, we're all just one step away from the ditch. I could be in the ditch tomorrow. And I think about that.
That's very similar. We're one decision away, right?
Yes.
Everybody's one decision away. Yep.
And so, he will say, the goal with peer support is not to get in the ditch and stay there with somebody. It's to reach down and help them get out of the ditch. And, I know how you feel. I felt that same way, but here's what I found. Come take a look at this and get them by the hand and bring them with you. And I think that's that, and what you just, the magic of what you just said, where you say, I don't understand, but I know someone who does.
Yeah.
And that's your example of leading the young man here to talk to one of the suicide prevention specialists to, get navigate literally how to get out of that. And I do think that there are. We do have some clients who struggle with that and they're repeat emergency room visitors, but they get a special kind of love there. Yep. And that's where they find that. And they don't want to be accountable yet. They want to be, that's their nurturing maybe. And so trying to figure out as a community, what do we do with that? How do we help those people?
Well, the other wrinkle to this whole thing that you guys also are very successful dealing with is the mental health aspect of this stuff, right? Because a lot of these folks are coming with a lot of baggage, and ADHD, which is something I've had since I was, I can remember I was on all the pills, Adderall and Ritalin and everything else. And I was on Zoloft for a little bit because that was a thing they were doing back when I was first starting. But, got some high functioning autistic people, and you've got some other folks. And then where was I the other day? I think she has been over here before, but I went over to Matsu Health, and they had a girl over there who's, her mom's not an addict. She's not poor. She's not homeless. Her mom just can't deal with her. So she kicked her and her 10-year-old brother off to North Star into the foster system. And all this girl wanted, and I could tell everything that I talked to her about, it just went back. I just want to go. I just want to be with my mom. And listening to her say that and knowing that her mom didn't want to be with her.
Right.
It killed me inside as a parent. I just don't understand.
It's so painful.
Like, how do you, I could never imagine doing that. And so, like, this is the type of stuff that you guys have people coming here dealing with.
Right.
And so I try to remember that. Like, I could never imagine my mom or my dad saying something like that or doing something like that to me or my siblings. And these people are living it. Mm-hmm. And then we get upset at them because they don't want to behave or act right.
Right.
Right. Like, I get it, but there's something else going on, and you got to take the time. The
intensity of the pain that would cause you, the rejection.
Horrible.
Do you know that when we first started this, community-wide, there was sort of a concern. There was a doctor across the street that didn't want us here and was going to city council meetings. And thankfully, the city supported us. The city literally said, we'll give you 2 years. If the neighborhood goes to heck in a handbasket, then we got to talk. But, do good. And so we were doing good. But in the scope of that, we had we had a couple different situations where a mom called and said, my daughter's 18 today and I'm done with her. You can come get her. She's at the end of the driveway. It was about 10 degrees outside, and Jay took off in the outreach van, loaded 8 garbage bags full of stuff, everything from her childhood bedroom, and brought her here. And that was really the first time that we all just stood around looking at each other like, what in the world? And that's not the only time that happened. And so we did a Survey Monkey. Every kid that came in for the first 2.5 years, we had them fill out this computer online questionnaire that was anonymous. So it wasn't connected to their name, but we had their demographics. 76% of kids said that they left home because of someone else's drinking or drug use, mental health issues, or a step parent or a parent that didn't want them. And the segment of parents that didn't want them was significant. And then we paid for 2 PhD psychologists to go to this national training in Atlanta, Georgia. That's the best family reunification mediation training there is. It's used in court cases. It's top shelf. It was expensive. We got a grant. We paid for them to go. They came back, and within, I think, 2.5 years from them returning, we referred 22 kids for mediation, and 21 parents said no. And so here we are sitting in a conference room with a kid, calling their parents to see if their parents would come and do mediation with a PhD psychologist who charges $225 an hour for his time.
How do you explain that to the kid?
Well,
like, what do you say to someone to even make them try to feel a little bit? There's absolutely nothing that you can say to somebody to take that sting away.
But what it does, Ryan, is that when we hang up with that call, what we have to say is, okay, so what we know is that we've got to empower you and help you to make the most of your future.
Sure.
And we can do this. You can decide where you want to go and what you want to do, and you're going to have to do it separate from your family at this point. And so one parent out of 22 said yes. All the kids were willing. Everybody said the kids will never do it. They don't want mediation. They don't want to live at home. They all wanted to be home.
Yeah, it was them that didn't want to.
Yeah.
You can't, I think as adults, it's easy for us to want to put everything on these kids, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that I see when I'm out here, I wholeheartedly blame parents.
Yeah.
Like, you have the most important role for the first, 15 to 20 years of this person's life. They're everything.
Yes.
And everything they learn, everything they hear, everything they see, everything they know is either going to come from you or in spite of you.
Yes.
And if you aren't there to help guide that person, there's a difference too. Like, we were just talking about the accountability thing, being a parent, being accountable. It's cool to go out and do fun stuff and be friends, but there's also got to be some tough conversations in there somewhere about, like, hey, this kind of stuff's not okay. This is why. And so, like, when I go home at night and I've got a story to tell, I tell my kids love it too. They're like, oh, Dad, tell us a story. But I do it for a reason. And I don't necessarily like include all the gory details, but I want my kids to understand how blessed they are.
Yeah.
To have a roof over their head and to have food on the table.
And parents that care.
And they have parents there, like, that are still together. You know, me and my wife just celebrated 20 years this year.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's something that we just want our kids, like, it doesn't have to be like all this other stuff.
Right.
Right. It doesn't have to be that way. You can have a good life if you try and you surround yourself with people that support you and love you and are willing to have those tough conversations. I think that's another thing. And I try to tell at least all the adult addicts that I'm with, like, one of the biggest steps you're going to need to take is stop hanging out with these other goofballs that I just caught you with.
Yeah.
They do not care about you. Not in the way you think they do.
Mm-mm.
They're miserable, and they want someone else to be miserable with them because they don't want to be alone, because nobody wants to be alone.
Right.
And so, and I know you just don't get it. You don't understand. Okay.
That's another thing that I learned from Carl is that when you're using, you're always surrounded by a lot of friends. When you overdose, you almost always die alone.
Correct. And the excuse that a lot of adult addicts like to use is, well, I'm trying to help them get clean. Like,
for
you
Pete's
cannot
sake.
even take care of yourself. I just pulled you out of a trap house.
Right.
You were not in there, like, preaching the gospel to these people, trying to pull them out of the depths, right? Like, you were in there watching it happen and doing it yourself. So when you lie to yourself, like, you have no chance. You've got to start. And I get it. That's a hard decision, right? Because these are people that are sharing in these experiences, so you feel like you have a connection with them. And these people get it. Well, they get it, but in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the fact that you guys are able, like I said, put your arms around people, have these good positive relationships with them, these accountability relationships, that's that iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good relationship. We make each other better by holding ourselves accountable
I
and
think
building
so
each
too.
other up.
I love the fact that you've got such a great team over there. Your officers. We've had several different experiences where, you know, I didn't have one specific thing that I needed a call for. I just had creepy people circling the block. And thanks for taking such good care of us.
Yeah.
I know we've had extra patrols.
I don't like creepy people either.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, and thanks for coming in too, because I mean, this was such a good conversation. I guess as we wrap up, when's the next Coffee with a Cop? Because I wasn't able to go to the last one either. When are we doing that again?
Well, I know the chief actually pulled me aside after this one. He wants to do the next one over at Wasilla at the senior center, which I think would be pretty cool.
That would be fun.
Yeah, so we're going to try to do this next month at Wasilla, and then we're kind of open. I've been trying to move around to different businesses in town, kind of share the love. Crema was all the places we've been have been extremely supportive, but Crema seemed very interested in trying to have it there a little bit more. But we really had a good time over here. I wish the troopers, it was just at a weird time during the day. Mm-hmm. And the troopers have been every single one except for this one. They just, the way they're stretched so thin. I mean, the Matsu Valley's the size of West Virginia, and they maybe got 4 to 6 people on a good day. Right. So they try real hard. Sergeant Phillips, Lieutenant Cooper, they've been really good about supporting this and getting people over here and being involved. And then our chief, obviously, and then, this for sure wouldn't be able to happen without Chief Long's support before she left and took Chief Rapson took over. And then he is still continuing to support the Coffee with a Cop thing. So it's been really nice. And then obviously the mayor loves it every time we come over here because she's over here all the time as well. And I got a really good relationship with her. So just hopefully we can continue that. I know a lot of the other officers started to come over here and visit as well.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's nice for me to see because people are like, what do you do over there all day? Like when I first started coming over, like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, I'm just hanging out. Like we're just talking and making friends and
visiting with people,
yeah.
sharing stories. You know, I'm amazed at the times that we've had an officer come in and we'll say, hey, you know what? We had blah, 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 blah. And then you guys will have something connected to that. Yep. And all of a sudden we got a story.
Yep.
Like, oh, we know who that is.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's community, right?
Sure.
I love this community. Thanks for being a part of our world and being so amazing.
Yeah.
In your support for youth, and we'd love to do anytime Coffee with the Cop. Maybe we do it quarterly or every 6 months here. Host it here. I love having it here because it helps the youth be comfortable with bigger groups of
Yeah,
officers.
that'd be cool.
So
Appreciate you having me.
that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Officer Ryan Hellman from the Wasilla Police Department for being with us. The My House podcast is recorded at the My House studio in Wasilla, Alaska. Our producer and editor is Isaac Smolden, and I'm Michelle Overstreet. Until next time.